The circus that never left. The tents appeared overnight, sprawling across a field that hadn't existed before, their stripes twisting unnaturally, colors bleeding in ways that made my eyes ache. I stepped closer, the grass crunching underfoot, and heard faint music, a calliope distorted, notes stretching and snapping like bones. Figures moved between tents, limping, bending, faces obscured by masks, stitched crudely from animal hide, grinning too wide, eyes darting independently. I approached a ticket booth, only to find no attendant, just a stack of writhing hands, small and pale, pressing against each other like a pulse. The air shimmered, heavy, and I felt each breath press against my chest, carrying faint whispers of laughter, screaming, applause, all impossible and yet present. A clown stepped forward, limbs bending impossibly, fingers curling in wrong directions, face painted in grotesque patterns that shifted when I looked away. I tried to move past, but the ground rippled subtly, shifting me toward the center of the circus, toward the big tent, where shadows gathered like storm clouds. Inside, performers twisted unnaturally, stretching and contorting mid-act, juggling knives that bent reality, tossing them through shadows that consumed sound itself. I realized the animals weren't real. Horses with elongated limbs, lions with skin stitched like fabric, birds with eyes too many and mouths too large. A small girl appeared, balancing on the edge of a spinning platform, hair flowing unnaturally, eyes black pools, whispering, "Welcome, stay forever." The shadows folded into shapes, crawling along walls, ceiling, and floor, brushing my skin, tugging at my senses, folding time and space into the tense rhythm. A performer reached for me, body twisting impossibly, smile stretching from ear to ear, teeth glinting faintly, hands bending backward to grip the air in unnatural ways. The calliope music grew louder, vibrating my bones, synchronizing with my heartbeat, pulling me toward the center, toward something patient and hungry beneath the canvas. I saw figures in the stands, patrons with faces too blank, eyes too wide, mouths opening in silent laughter, watching, waiting for me to become part of the act. The floor beneath me pulsed, rising slightly like liquid, forming shapes that resembled hands and faces, pressing against my legs, pulling me toward the center. I stumbled, shadows crawling over my shoulders, whispers scraping my skull, murmuring secrets I didn't want, bending my thoughts toward obedience. The clown's eyes glowed faintly, teeth clicking, and I could feel my perception bending, reality stretching, the tent folding around me like paper in invisible hands. I tried to back away, but the platforms shifted, spinning, raising, lowering, folding the acts around me, drawing me deeper into the impossible circus. A carousel turned in the distance, animals malformed, riders twisted into shapes too long, faces grinning at me silently, beckoning me forward. The small girl placed a hand on my shoulder, cold and firm, whispering, "You will perform. You will never leave." The shadows folded into me, into the performers, into the music, and I felt the pulse of the circus sync with my heartbeat, bending me, reshaping me into a part of it. I bolted from the tent, stumbling into the field, but the tent stretched endlessly behind me, the calliope music faint but persistent, a reminder that it waited, patient, hungry for the next curious soul. The carnival of eyes. The carnival appeared at the edge of town, lights swinging in impossible arcs, colors bleeding into each other, the smell of sugar and smoke carrying faint whispers. I stepped onto the gravel path, noticing that every tent swayed slightly as if alive, shadows crawling along the seams, curling toward me with patience. A ticket booth appeared suddenly, empty except for a pile of coins that writhed like worms, flipping and twisting as if counting invisible hands. Figures emerged from the tents, acrobats bending backward impossibly, faces stitched with skin, mouths stretching into grins too wide, eyes blinking independently in every direction. The calliope music twisted, notes stretching, snapping like broken bones, echoing off tense and tense within tense, pressing into my chest, sinking with my heartbeat. A small girl stepped out, hair wet with something dark, eyes too large, whispering my name in a melody that made my skull ache. I walked forward, the gravel beneath me rippling like water, shadows curling over my feet, pressing, tugging, bending space subtly to guide me deeper. The Ferris wheel spun without support, cars folding inward, passengers inside, contorting into shapes impossible, faces pressed against glass, screaming silently, eyes following me. Inside a tent, mirrors reflected me back, each reflection twisted, multiplied, with eyes where there should have been skin, grins splitting faces in impossible ways. The child appeared again. Small hand pointing toward a carousel, horses with elongated legs, necks bending backward, eyes glowing faintly, manes writhing as if alive. I stepped closer, and the horses' mouths opened, teeth grinding, whispers sliding out like liquid, promising knowledge and punishment in a rhythm I felt in my chest. The gravel shifted beneath me, forming small hands, wrapping around my ankles, tugging gently but persistently, pressing me toward the carousel's center. Figures in masks emerged from the shadows, limbs folding, crawling along walls and tents, fingers twitching like spiders, eyes glinting faintly in the pulsing light. I turned to leave, but the tents had multiplied, forming impossible corridors, doors folding into walls, colors bending, shadows pressing, folding space subtly around me. The carousel spun faster, horses stretching and folding, riders' faces melting, grins splitting wider, eyes blinking in patterns that disoriented perception entirely. The child whispered in my ear, "You belong here. See what the carnival remembers." Its small hand pressed against my chest, leaving a cold pulse, bending perception. The calliope twisted again, echoing, bouncing off tents, walls, air itself, sinking with my heartbeat, tugging at my chest, bending my mind to the carnival's rhythm. Figures crawled along the canvas, merging with shadows, twisting into shapes that pressed against my vision, tugged my limbs, whispered my fears into my skull. I stumbled, falling into a tent filled with dolls, each molded from shadows. Eyes too large, mouths moving silently, all staring, waiting, pulling me toward them with patience. The Ferris wheel lights blinked in sync with my pulse, shadows crawling upward, extending from the ride itself, pressing against me, pulling perception subtly into impossible angles. The child climbed onto my shoulder, wet and heavy, whispering, "Step closer, and you will see forever. Refuse and vanish." The shadows curled tighter. The ground beneath me rippled like liquid, forming faces and hands, tugging at my legs, pulling me closer to the carousel, to the child, to the waiting crowd of figures. I tried to move backward, but the tents twisted, corridors folding, mirrors multiplying, reflections pressing into each other, faces screaming silently in impossible loops. A figure emerged, tall and thin, limbs bending backward, masks stitched crudely, eyes glinting faintly, moving without sound, pulling shadows around itself like ink in water. The carousel spun violently, horses lunging, riders' faces folding, screams echoing silently, and I felt myself bending, aligning with the pulse of the carnival, folding perception entirely. The child whispered once more, "You are part of the show now. You will never leave." Its small hands pressed against my chest, tugging gently, bending my mind. Shadows wrapped around me, the tents twisted further, mirrors multiplied, figures crawling along every surface, pulling me into the carnival's rhythm, syncing my heartbeat with the calliope. I stumbled out suddenly, back onto gravel that was normal again, night still, carnival gone, yet I could still feel its pulse in my chest, patient, waiting, promising return. Even now, when fog rolls in at night, I sense shapes in the mist, colors bleeding unnaturally, whispers tugging at my thoughts. The carnival patient, hungry, never letting go. The children who whispered my name. I walked along the edge of the old forest, where the trees bent unnaturally, roots curling like fingers across the path, shadows shifting in ways that felt alive. A faint whisper echoed, soft and playful, calling my name. I froze, heart thudding, but the voice was unmistakable, familiar, yet wrong. Children appeared from the mist, tiny and pale, eyes too wide, skin almost translucent. They circled me silently, heads tilting in perfect unison, grinning. They beckoned with trembling hands, but when I tried to approach, their forms flickered, disappearing and reappearing a few steps ahead, taunting my every movement. The forest pulsed faintly, as if breathing with me, shadows stretching to mirror the children's movements, crawling across trunks and branches like living ink. One of the children knelt, tilting its head. Its smile split unnaturally wide, revealing rows of tiny, sharpened teeth, and I felt something inside me coil like a snake. I stepped backward, tripping over a root that writhed beneath my foot, curling upward and gripping my ankle with surprising strength. The children began to whisper in unison, voices layering over each other, creating a melody that pressed into my skull, tugging at memories I didn't remember having. A faint light glimmered between the trees, revealing small figures tied to stakes, faceless dolls that writhed and twisted, their bodies mimicking the children's movements perfectly. The ground pulsed beneath me, warm and sticky, and I realized the forest floor itself was alive, reshaping to trap me within its twisted geometry. I tried to run, but every path twisted back, the trees bending subtly, forming corridors that folded impossibly, shadows crawling along the edges like dark water. The children approached slowly, their whispers growing louder, melodic yet horrific, promising knowledge I didn't want, and punishment I couldn't escape. A figure emerged from the mist behind them, taller, distorted, limbs folding backward, face hidden beneath stitched skin, watching, patient, calculating my fear. I looked down and saw my own footprints crawling backward, small faces peeking from the soil, whispering, mocking, mirroring my panic. The tallest child stepped forward, tilting its head in a human gesture, yet its body contorted unnaturally, limbs bending wrong, skin folding, a grin stretching impossibly wide. I felt an invisible tug, like the shadows themselves were pulling me forward, toward the twisted figure, toward the children, toward something ancient and hungry. The mist thickened, curling into shapes, snakes, faces, hands crawling along my arms and legs, whispering my deepest fears with voices that were my own. One of the children brushed a hand against my cheek. I felt heat and cold simultaneously, memories slipping from me, replaced by visions of their playgrounds beneath stone and soil. The figure stretched toward me, bending through space, an impossible movement that left me dizzy, disoriented, trapped in the rhythm of the whispers and shadows. The children began to circle faster, chanting names of the dead and missing, weaving them into my own name, folding me into their game, into their reality. Roots reached out from the ground, gripping my legs, pulling me closer, twisting me in their embrace, while the children's whispers escalated into a deafening, rhythmic chant. I tried to scream, but my voice dissolved into the wind, carried off by the mist, leaving only the pressure of the children's gaze pressing into my chest. A small hand touched my shoulder. My vision split into multiple layers, each showing versions of the forest I hadn't seen, each inhabited by children who whispered my name. The figure leaned close, a shadow folding over my body, and I could feel its breath like metal scraping across my spine, words entering my mind. You belong to the waiting. I stumbled, collapsing onto the forest floor. When I looked up, the mist had thinned, the children gone, the forest silent. Yet the whisper of my name lingered, patient, waiting, promising return. The lighthouse that laughed. The lighthouse appeared at the edge of the cliff overnight, its beam slicing the black ocean, though the coast had no such structure before. I climbed the jagged rocks, waves lashing violently, yet the path remained dry, as if reality itself bent to guide me toward the light. The door creaked open before I reached it, revealing a spiral staircase that stretched impossibly upward, each step narrower than the last, vibrating faintly under my weight. Inside, walls shimmered like liquid, reflecting impossible angles, distorted versions of me climbing endlessly, eyes wide, mouths moving in silent laughter. The stairs groaned beneath me, echoing sounds that weren't mine, whispers of sailors lost, visitors trapped, all folded into the lighthouse's rhythm. At the top, the lantern room glowed, but the source was alive, flame flickering like a mouth, teeth visible, shadows crawling along the walls in response. A figure stood in the center, head tilting impossibly, arms bending backward, mask stitched from dark leather, its gaze piercing mine without moving its eyes. I tried to step back, but the stairs twisted beneath me, folding into themselves, forcing me forward toward the beam, toward the figure, toward something ancient and cruel. The walls pulsed, sending vibrations through my bones, and I realized the lighthouse itself was alive, breathing, feeding, reshaping the world around me. From the beam, faces appeared in the fog outside, sailors, wanderers, and shadows of people I recognized, all frozen mid-scream, mouths opening and closing in silent horror. The figure raised a hand, and the flame pulsed, projecting shadows that crawled across the floor and ceiling, folding the room into impossible angles, trapping me in the rhythm of its laughter. I felt tendrils of light curl around my limbs, bending me slightly, urging me forward into the beam, merging me with the lighthouse's pulse, aligning me with its madness. The floor beneath my feet rippled, turning liquid, carrying reflections of those trapped before me, faces twisted, eyes wide, screaming silently as I stepped closer to the figure. The laughter grew, filling the room, bending space, each echo pressing into my chest, into my skull, syncing my heartbeat with the lantern's pulse. I realized the mask was moving, stretching subtly, revealing rows of teeth and eyes beneath, blinking independently, all fixed on me, patient and hungry. Outside, the ocean reflected the impossible. Ships folded over themselves, waves standing vertically, storm clouds twisting like fingers, all part of the lighthouse's world. I stumbled backward, trying to retreat, but the staircase had vanished, replaced by a floor that flexed and pulsed, bending my perception and pulling me toward the flame. A small shadow appeared at my feet, crawling like a child, whispering words I understood instinctively. You are the next beacon. You will shine. The figure extended its arms, and shadows detached from the walls, coiling around me, whispering in tones that pressed into my bones, tugging at my mind and memory. I tried to resist, but the lighthouse's pulse sensed with mine, bending my body, my perception, until I felt myself folding slightly, aligning with its rhythm. A sudden silence fell. I was outside, wet from the ocean spray, lighthouse gone. Yet I could feel its laughter and pulse inside me, patient, waiting for the next night, the next curiosity. Even now, fog thickens at the cliffs, and I swear I can see a faint beam bending through darkness, calling my name, promising I'll never leave completely. The river that remembered. The river wasn't there yesterday, yet tonight it wound through the town, black water rippling with a light that seemed alive, reflecting shapes that weren't mine. I stepped onto the bank, the mud soft, almost sucking at my shoes, and heard faint whispers, voices recalling secrets I hadn't spoken in years. Figures emerged from the water, thin, elongated, faces pressed against their translucent skin, mouths moving silently, eyes black and unblinking, following my every step. A branch bent down to touch me, though no tree was near, and I recoiled, feeling a pulse run through my fingers, connecting me to the river itself. The water rippled, and reflections warped, showing my past, my fears, my regrets, each image twisting impossibly, folding into one another, pressing against my mind. I tried to walk along the riverbank, but the ground shifted, ripples forming underfoot, pulling me closer, bending the path in ways that made my stomach knot. A small child crawled from the water, skin pale and wet, hair slicked back, whispering my name, voice familiar but wrong, echoing with every drop that fell from the sky. I stepped back, and the river expanded suddenly, swallowing the bank, dragging reeds and stones into shapes that resembled screaming faces, reaching for me with fingers of mud. A shadow stretched across the river, folding in on itself, forming impossible shapes, bending space, tugging at the air in my chest, pressing me toward the water. Figures in the water moved closer, their faces elongating, teeth sharp and glinting, mouths opening in perfect sync, whispering promises I couldn't resist, secrets I didn't want. I stumbled backward, and the mud gripped my shoes, pulling me toward the river, hands forming from the soil itself, wrapping around my ankles with patient strength. A figure emerged from the center of the river, tall, cloaked in darkness, limbs bending backward, face stitched with water and shadows, eyes glinting faintly, observing me silently. The water surface bubbled, and whispers layered, voices of everyone I'd ever known, lost or alive, merging into a single tone, pressing into my skull, syncing with my heartbeat. The child reached out, dripping water from fingers like melting wax, tracing patterns on my arm that burned faintly, leaving marks I could feel in my bones. I tried to retreat, but the riverbank stretched endlessly, path bending in impossible loops, shadows crawling from the trees, from the water, from beneath my feet. The figure lifted an arm, and the water pulsed, small waves forming hands, grasping at me, pulling me forward, bending space, pressing my body toward the river's center. I saw shapes in the water, reflections of people I knew, twisted, screaming silently, layered atop one another, pressed into the surface like trapped memories. A sudden gust of wind carried faint laughter, distorted and echoing, brushing my neck, pressing the air against my chest, folding my perception into the river's pulse. The child climbed onto my shoulder, wet and heavy, whispering words I understood instinctively. You belong. The river remembers all who walk near. Roots emerged from the bank, curling around my legs, climbing upward, twisting, pressing me closer to the water, while figures reached from the surface, hands grasping, pulling. I tried to look away, but the river's reflection filled every surface, twisting, bending, echoing impossible versions of me, faces screaming, mouths opening in endless repetition. The cloaked figure bent forward, and the water formed waves that reached into me, tugging at my chest, bending my spine, pressing me into its rhythm. A branch slithered like a serpent, wrapping around my arm, whispering secrets in tones I could feel in my bones, each word bending perception, pulling memory from my skull. The water pulsed faster, figures moving in synchronicity, bending space, forming impossible shapes that pressed against me, whispering, tugging, bending me into the river's rhythm. I stumbled, sinking slightly into the mud, and felt the river's pulse align with my heartbeat, my chest pressing in time with the water, tugging me forward. The child leaned close, whispering, "Step in and be remembered. Refuse and vanish." The river seemed to breathe, pulsing, reaching, hungry for compliance. I stepped forward, limbs trembling, and felt the water curl around my ankles, then knees, then waist, tugging, pressing, folding me into itself, aligning my pulse with the river's. Shapes twisted in the current, forming faces of those who'd been drawn before, whispering names I recognized, voices blending, pressing, folding into my mind like a dark lullaby. The river's pulse reached my chest fully, shadows curling up my arms, wrapping around my neck, pressing my vision into reflections that weren't mine, distorted beyond comprehension. I fell forward, chest hitting the surface, water cold and alive, whispers flooding my mind, bending reality, folding my perception, folding my memory into the river itself. I awoke on the bank, night quiet, river gone, yet I could still feel it pulsing faintly inside, a patient heartbeat waiting, promising I would return.